A lot of my friends have been working for years. Some now manage teams. Others are individual contributors, or ICs, focused on their own area of work. When we catch up, I often hear two very different complaints about the same workplace problem. My manager friends will say, "My team feels so disengaged lately. I go over the details 100 times and things still fall through the cracks. It feels like I'm the only person on the team who actually cares about the project." My IC friends are just as frustrated. They'll say, "Management is just so annoying lately. Like, I finished my part on time. Something went wrong somewhere else. And now they're asking why I didn't warn anyone. How could I? I didn't even know what was happening over there." Listening to them, both sides sound like victims. And I know these people are smart, capable, and responsible. Maybe you recognize yourself in one of them. You might be the manager filling the gaps, or the IC blamed for something you never had the chance to see. Either way, you probably feel you did your part. But if you did your part, and everyone around you did the same, why did the work still fail to come together as a team? Why didn't it feel like you were actually collaborating? Here at Unordinary Mind, we usually look at how a single mind works. Today, I want to look at what happens when many minds have to work together. Whenever you start a task, your mind builds an invisible project map. It is your mental representation of the work. The map helps you answer 3 questions. What is the goal? How do I get there? And why does this matter to me? These are the what, the how, and the why. Together, these answers guide what you do next. When several minds work together, each person builds a different version of that map based on the work they're responsible for. We'll call this a local map. Local maps don't need to look the same, but they must connect to a larger shared map. The shared map shows what the team is trying to achieve and how each person's work connects. That connection is harder than it sounds. On a large team, you may see only one narrow piece. On a small team, you may have to spread your attention across a dozen different parts of the project every day. One gives you too narrow a view, the other gives you too much to hold. Even perfect documentation only proves the information exists somewhere. It doesn't mean everyone understands it the same way. The trouble is, many teams assume the shared map is already aligned. They only discover the differences after the project has already started going wrong. But before we can align those maps, we need to ask, what happened to the why, or why the work matters to you? For more and more people, beyond paying the bills, it has become hard to find a reason to care. That helps explain why quiet quitting and acting your wage have become so familiar. If you are a manager, it's easy to think that people simply don't work as hard as they used to. But organizational psychology offers another explanation. Many people no longer trust the psychological contract at work. The psychological contract is a promise many of us carried into work, though no one wrote it down. You give more than your basic duties. You offer loyalty, flexibility, extra time, and care. In return, you expect stability, room to grow, and the sense that you're building something together. For many people, that promise no longer feels believable. Layoffs happen quickly, teams are reorganized, and roles can disappear with little warning. Yet companies still expect you to think and act like an owner. When extra effort no longer brings security, influence, or recognition, it's only natural to ask whether this is still worth it. That's when your local map starts to shrink. You stop watching problems that aren't officially yours, even if they might affect your work later. Eventually, only one guarded area remains, called my basic responsibilities. And even if you notice a risk outside that area, past experience may tell you to leave it alone. This is the smaller, everyday version of the why. Because if speaking up only creates more work, but rarely changes the outcome, why would you keep doing it? So if you find yourself pulling back, it doesn't automatically mean you're lazy. You may simply be tired, disappointed, or trying to stop giving more to a relationship that no longer feels mutual. And if you're a manager, you're living inside that same broken contract, and you aren't necessarily benefiting from it. When team members pull back, responsibility for the final result still lands on you. A client may change requirements. Senior leadership may promise a new deadline. but you're still expected to deliver without more time, people, or budget. This is often called the middle management squeeze. You're caught between team members tightening their boundaries and growing demands from above or outside. This can make it harder for the two sides to understand each other. You see what saying no could cost with a client or senior leader, but your team members see how much extra work saying yes will create. You and your team see the same project from different points on the map. This also explains why you may lose touch with the IC experience, even if you started as one. It isn't because you've forgotten what the work feels like. Your new role simply puts different risks and consequences in front of you each day. Pressure can widen that gap further. Organizational psychology calls this the Threat-Rigidity Effect. When a situation feels like it's slipping out of your control, you may develop a kind of psychological tunnel vision, focusing only on whatever is directly in front of you. When that happens, it's easy to focus so closely on deadlines that you lose sight of what each person is dealing with. This is where the how begins to break down. Outside pressure quickly becomes a new task for the team, but the context around it, especially the less obvious consequences, can easily get lost. For example, what else will this new task affect? Which new details need attention? And what can we put aside for now? From where you stand, it's easy to assume those consequences are obvious. But your team member is already handling existing work and may not have the mental space to rebuild the missing context. They may follow the request exactly, miss the chain reaction, and unintentionally create another problem. Neither side wants this, but the cycle has begun. Under pressure, managers may tighten control to keep moving, while team members shrink their maps to protect themselves. Eventually, the shared map disappears. So where does that leave us? If we want a group of people to function as a team, we need clear answers to 3 questions. First comes the what. Are everyone's local maps aligned with the same shared map? Then comes the how. Can information move between those maps without losing its context in both directions? And finally, the why. Even if people understand the project and know how to speak up, do they actually believe that extra effort will lead anywhere? As individuals, we may not be able to change the way employment works today or solve the larger why problem for everyone. But inside one team, we can still work on the what and how problems by creating a simple structure, a structure that helps keep everyone's maps aligned and information flowing. And a structure like that alone might give you enough reason to stay engaged. Because it aims to create a way of working where your input gets a response. Your perspective is taken seriously, and you can feel that your work matters to the larger project. So let's look at how to build that. We start before the project begins, because that's when you have the best chance to find out whether everyone is really looking at the same shared map. Is everyone aiming for the same result? Do they understand how the work connects? What could go wrong? And who should respond? You don't need a complicated alignment meeting. The most natural way to compare those maps is simply to talk about what could go wrong. A simple method called a pre-mortem can help here. It asks everyone to imagine that several months have passed and the project has failed. Then the team works backward together to find out what caused the failure. This uses a cognitive trick called prospective hindsight. When people imagine the failure as if it has already happened, they become better at spotting the paths that could lead there. It also lowers the social risk of pointing out a problem. Finding risks is now the official assignment, so no one has to worry as much about looking negative or uncooperative. Each person can bring in the concerns that are visible only from their local map. Once those risks are out in the open, the team has time to understand how they could affect the project and prepare a response. It might feel like a gloomy conversation about failure, but it's actually a great way to align everyone's maps before the work even starts. Once the project starts, the how is often the first thing to break. As new demands bring more pressure, everyone's attention can narrow again very quickly. So whenever a task is passed down, the minimum necessary context should come with it. The person doing the work needs to know why the task changed and what else it could affect. At minimum, they need to know what might now be overlooked. Managers don't need to explain every background detail, But a team member needs more than "this is urgent." They need enough context to fit the task back into the shared map. But information also needs a reliable way to travel up. When a team member points out a risk, the team should provide what we can call visible closure. That means a clear response within a specific time frame. The response doesn't always have to be yes. The team may act, investigate, or explain why the issue is being put on hold. What matters is that the concern doesn't simply disappear. The person who raised it knows what happened and can see that their perspective was taken seriously. Context helps people execute the work safely and fit it back into the shared map. Visible closure answers a different question. It shows why speaking up may still be worth it. So the rhythm is fairly simple. Before the project begins, make risks easier to see and say. While the team is working, send context down and responses back up. But as the project moves forward, priorities and the information people hold will inevitably change. Even a shared map that was aligned at the start can split into different versions again. That's why it helps to take 10 minutes for a structured debrief after every major cycle. What did we intend to do? What actually happened? Where did the gap appear? And what is one thing the team should do differently next time? For 10 minutes, everyone gets to look up from the pressure of their own local map and see the same project again. If you're a team member without formal authority, this may sound like something only a leader can change, but you can still reduce some of the uncertainty around your own work. When a task changes, ask why and discuss what might now be overlooked. When handing work to someone else, pass along the context they will need. And when you raise a warning, ask when you should expect a response. You don't have to take on someone else's responsibility. Whether you're a manager or an IC, you can simply build a small pocket of certainty around your own local map. That small change can travel. A clearer handoff helps the next person respond more clearly, and over time, the team will become easier for you to work into. These methods are actually quite simple. Yet when a team feels disconnected, many companies instead choose more team building events or ask everyone to act more like a family. If that has never felt like enough to you, your instinct is right. More team building can't repair a map no one shares or a signal no one answers. A team may eventually grow close enough to feel like family, and that can be a beautiful thing. But that warmth has to grow out of trust. It grows when you know the right context will reach you and someone will respond when you raise a concern. It grows out of a healthy structure, not emotional connection alone. Now, let's return to the two friends we started with. While working on this video, I asked both of them to read the script. My manager friend said they want to try a pre-mortem with their team next time. My IC friend said they will try to ask for more context from now on. I hope these small changes make the next project a little easier for both of them. That makes me wonder about you. Which step will you start with? If you want some help choosing, I've put the what, how, and why framework, along with some practical examples, into a printable guide. You can download it using the link in the description. Of course, having the right structure doesn't mean you will always have the right words. If your best ideas often arrive only after the moment has passed, you can watch my video about staircase wit next. Thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.